All right, ready for another deep dive. This time into something you see every day but probably never think about, how fruit flies fly.
Hmm, interesting.
We've got a ton of research here, and let me tell you, it's way more complex than just flapping their wings.
I bet.
We're going to uncover the world of biomechanics and neurons that get these little guys off the ground. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? How something so seemingly simple can actually involve such intricate mechanisms.
Okay, so first things first. A lot of these sources describe fruit flies as nature's hippies. What do you think about that?
You know, it's actually kind of a fun way to put it. Unlike bees that stick to a hive and just specific flower patches, fruit flies are constantly on the move, always out there exploring for food wherever they can find it.
Right.
They've evolved to be, well, really adaptable and opportunistic, and that's definitely shaped their flight behavior in a pretty unique way.
It's like they're on a constant road trip, always looking for that next interesting stop. But before they hit the road, how do they even get airborne in the first place?
Wait.
Have you ever noticed that little jump they do before taking off?
Oh, you're right. Most people don't even notice that initial launch sequence.
Yeah.
It's actually quite a coordinated effort. So they raise their wings, they extend their middle legs for like a powerful jump, and then simultaneously they depress their wings to create lift.
Wow.
And all of this happens in just a fraction of a second.
It's so much happening in the blink of an eye.
It really is.
And then they're just off, wings buzzing like crazy. How fast are we talking here?
Well, their wings actually beat between 150 to 200 times per second.
Wow.
Yeah. And to achieve this, they use what's called an indirect flight muscle system. So imagine their thorax, the middle part of their body, is like a box, right?
Okay.
Inside this box are muscles that aren't actually directly attached to the wings.
Mm.
Instead, they work in opposition, squeezing and expanding that thorax, which then drives the wing movement.
Oh, so it's like their whole body is this tiny engine powering those wings.
Exactly.
But how do the muscles know when to contract that fast? Does it like a signal from the brain with every single beat?
Well, that's where it gets really cool. These muscles are what we call stretch activated, meaning they contract in response to being stretched.
Oh.
Think about it like our hearts. Each heartbeat isn't triggered by a separate nerve signal, right?
Right.
The heart muscle itself is designed to contract when it's stretched.
Oh, I see. So once the fly jumps and the thorax gets that initial squeeze, the muscles just kind of keep going, stretching and contracting automatically.
Exactly. But there is an initial signal that's needed to kickstart the whole process. And this comes from the fly's brain through a specific muscle that kind of gives the thorax that first squeeze. That sets the whole cycle in motion.
So the brain sends that start signal, and then those stretch-activated muscles take over. But here's a weird thought. We've all seen those headless flies running around.
Right.
Can they still fly without their heads?
Nope, they can't. Because that initial start signal that comes from the brain, and without it, they're grounded. And this brings us to a really fascinating structure called the giant fiber, which is the largest neuron in the fly.
Wow.
It runs from the brain all the way down to the thorax. And when the fly decides, okay, time to take off, this giant fiber fires, and that triggers the whole flight sequence.
Hold on. So one single neuron can actually make a fly take off?
That's right.
That's incredible. It kind of reminds me of those giant neurons in jellyfish that we talked about before. Are they related at all?
You're picking up on a crucial evolutionary pattern there. Just like those jellyfish neurons control their escape responses, the giant fiber in flies, well, it controls both flight and escape.
So when we try to swat a fly and it darts away, that's that giant fiber at work.
Exactly. And that rapid response, it really highlights how important stability is for these tiny flyers,
Right.
Think about it. They can maneuver with just incredible precision, even in turbulent conditions. That takes some serious neural coordination.
That's a perfect transition to our next question.
Yeah.
How do they stay so stable in the air? I mean, they're so small and lightweight, it seems like they just get blown around by the slightest breeze.
Well, they have a secret weapon called the halter.
Okay.
So imagine a tiny club-shaped structure behind each wing.
Right.
These halters, they vibrate during flight, and they act like gyroscopes.
Gyroscopes, like those spinning toys that stay balanced.
Yes, exactly. So as the fly rotates or tilts, the halters sense the change in force, and then they send signals to steering muscles in the thorax, which allows for constant adjustments.
Wow, so it's like a constant feedback loop.
It is.
The halters are like these tiny sensors, and the steering muscles keep the fly perfectly balanced.
Precisely.
But here's a crazy thought. What happens if a fly loses a wing? Can it still fly?
It might surprise you, but they can often fly with damaged wings. However, if they lose their halters, they're done for. They just can't maintain stability without them.
That is wild. It's like they have this built-in autopilot system that's more important than the wings themselves. Okay, so they can take off, they can stay stable, but how do they actually navigate and figure out where they're going?
That brings us to their vision, which is really incredible. Their compound eyes are like motion detectors,
Yeah.
highly sensitive to any movement, especially fast movement.
So they see the world totally differently than we do.
Absolutely. Think of their eyes as hundreds of individual lenses. Each one has its own little set of photoreceptors.
Okay.
And this setup, it gives them a much, much wider field of view. And their brains are wired to just prioritize movement above everything else.
So it's less about like what they actually see
Yeah.
and more about how things are moving around them.
Precisely. They even have these specialized neurons that respond to specific types of motion. So some are sensitive to vertical movement, others are sensitive to horizontal movement. So it gives them a very, very detailed picture of everything that's happening around them.
Okay, that's super cool. But it can't just be these individual cells, doing their own thing. How do they all work together to create this coherent picture?
Well, that's the real magic, isn't it? Is the interconnectedness of these neurons forming these complex networks. And that's what allows the fly to actually process all that visual information and make sense of its surroundings.
Right.
So it's not just seeing movement, it's understanding it.
So they can sense movement, they can stay stable in the air, but can they actually make decisions about where to fly? Or are they just reacting to whatever, catches their eye?
That is a great question, and it's one that scientists have been exploring using some pretty ingenious techniques.
Oh, cool.
So imagine a fly in a tiny, tiny virtual reality arena.
Okay.
It's tethered, so it can't actually fly away. But its wing movements, they control these images that are projected all around it. So it creates this simulated flying experience.
Wait, a virtual reality for flies? That's wild. What have they learned from these experiments?
Well, they've discovered that flies don't just react, they actually make decisions about what to fly towards. And there's a specific part of their brain called the mushroom bodies that plays a key role in this decision-making process.
So these mushroom bodies are like the fly's command center for deciding where to go.
You could say that, and here's where it gets even more interesting. So when a fly decides, okay, I'm going to track this target, there's an increase in activity in the mushroom bodies, right?
Yeah.
And guess what neurotransmitter is involved?
Let me guess. Dopamine. The reward chemical.
Exactly. It seems flies get a dopamine rush when they're pursuing something that's interesting to them.
Wow.
It suggests they're not just reacting to their environment, but they're actively seeking out things that are rewarding to them.
So that kind of makes them sound a lot more sophisticated than I ever imagined. It ties back to that idea of them being nature's hippies, Always out there searching for something new.
Right, and the virtual reality experiments have actually confirmed that. Flies consistently choose to track novel images over familiar ones. So they're really driven by novelty, by the experience of something new.
So they're not just looking for food or mates. They actually find novelty itself rewarding. That's pretty incredible.
It really is, and it all kind of points to this idea that even these tiny creatures have something akin to curiosity, a drive to explore and learn about their surroundings.
Okay, so we've gone from these incredibly fast muscles to the giant escape neuron to a built-in gyroscope, and now to a brain that seeks out new experiences. It's mind-blowing how much is packed into this tiny fly.
I know, and we haven't even touched on the fact that flies can learn.
Wait.
Yeah. They can associate certain smells or visual cues with positive or negative experiences, and then they can adjust their behavior accordingly.
Wait, are you telling me flies can learn? Like remember things and change their actions based on what they've learned?
Absolutely. They've been used in countless experiments to study learning and memory because they can learn these simple associations quite effectively.
Wow.
Like, for example, they can be trained to avoid certain odors if those odors are paired with a mild electric shock.
Wow, I never would have thought a fly was capable of that. But thinking back to those dopamine spikes we talked about earlier, it makes sense.
Right.
If they get a reward signal for learning something new, it would reinforce that behavior, wouldn't it?
Exactly. And that's where it gets really, really exciting because by studying these relatively simple brains, we can start to unravel those fundamental principles of how learning and memory work. And these are principles that might even apply to more complex brains like ours.
It's incredible to think that we can learn so much about ourselves by studying something as small and seemingly insignificant as a fly.
That's the beauty of science, isn't it? It's all interconnected. The more we learn about the natural world, the more we learn about our place within it. And who knows, maybe by understanding how a fly learns to avoid a bad smell, we might unlock some secrets about how our own brains process and store information.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From those super fast muscles to the giant fiber that triggers their escape and flight to the halters that act like a built-in gyroscope.
Yeah, and we even explored how flies actually use their motion detecting vision to navigate and even that surprising ability to learn and remember things.
Yeah, I'm starting to think we really underestimate these little guys. They're not just these annoying buzzing things. They're like tiny, tiny flying machines packed with incredible biology.
Exactly. And what's really, really fascinating is how all these different systems actually work together. So we've talked about, the individual components, the muscles, the neurons, the sensory organs, but it's the integration of all these pieces that makes flight so remarkable.
Oh, so it's like a symphony orchestra,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You have all these different instruments playing their parts, but it's the conductor, the fly's brain, that brings everything together to create this beautiful, complex performance.
That's a great analogy. And it's not just about coordinating movement, it's about integrating that sensory information, making decisions, and even adapting behavior based on past experiences.
It's mind-blowing to think about all the things a fly has to do just to stay airborne, let alone navigate a complex environment, find food, and avoid getting swatted.
Right. And remember, this is all happening in a brain that's about the size of a poppy seed. It really highlights the incredible efficiency and sophistication of evolution.
So what's the big takeaway here? Why should we even care about how a fly flies?
Well, aside from just the sheer wonder of it all, studying these seemingly simple creatures can actually teach us a lot about some pretty fundamental biological principles that apply to all animals, including ourselves.
Like what?
Well, think about those stretch activated muscles in the fly's thorax. They work on the same basic principle as our heart muscles. So by understanding how these systems work in a simply organism, we can gain insights into our own biology.
And what about their vision? We talked about how they prioritize movement. What can that tell us about our own visual system?
Well, it highlights the fact that vision isn't just about, passively receiving information. It's about actively extracting meaning from the world around us. And that process is shaped by the specific needs and challenges of each species.
And then there's that whole dopamine reward system that drives their novelty-seeking behavior.
Oh yeah, that's a particularly fascinating area of research because it suggests that curiosity and the drive to explore they might be deeply ingrained in many animals, and it makes you wonder about the evolutionary roots of these behaviors and what role they play in survival and adaptation.
So by studying flies, we might actually be able to unlock some secrets about our own brains and how we interact with the world.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even the smallest and seemingly insignificant creatures can hold these profound insights into the workings of life itself.
Well, I have to say I'm never going to look at a fruit fly the same way again. The next time I see one
Mhm.
buzzing around,
Yeah.
I'll be thinking about all those complex systems working in perfect harmony to keep it aloft.
And hopefully you'll appreciate that while they might be annoying at times, they're also incredible examples of the power and beauty of evolution.
Absolutely. So to all our listeners out there, the next time you encounter a fruit fly, take a moment to marvel at the tiny marvel of engineering and neural sophistication that it is. And who knows, maybe it'll even inspire you to do a little deep dive of your own into the fascinating world of science.
There's a whole universe of wonder out there waiting to be discovered, even in the most unexpected places.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of fruit fly flight. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.